Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 112 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans, and hello, hurting Husker fans.
A special hello to all of our Husker faithful out there.
Yes.
For those of you who are listening to this podcast for the first time, this is College Football Throwdown, a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. And we are here today, a father-son duo, to talk about our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, their game against Michigan, as well as the big games from Week 6 and what's coming up next week for Week 7 of college football. So to dive into things, we are going to be talking about the Nebraska-Michigan game today. But before we go into the specifics on how the game went, I believe we both have some beverages to crack here for the podcast.
Now, are you drinking that Japanese one again?
Yep, same six-pack.
You're amazing. I'm drinking a Labatt Blue, one of my last, Canadian beers that is a stalwart for me whenever I'm back at home in Traverse City, Michigan. But it's harder to find in Arizona, so yeah. I'm about ready to be out of it, which is a bummer. But I'm going to enjoy this one.
All right, here we go.
There we go. Awesome.
All right. I actually love Labatt Blue as well, so I'm a little jealous of you. So to dive into things, we'll start things out as usual with what our predictions were from the previous podcast. And I was the one kind of going in with the realist mindset of Nebraska's going to lose this game, but we're going to play it close. And I predicted that Michigan would win 24-17, whereas you decided to take the optimist view and said that Nebraska was going to win 38-28. And one thing that we did both agree on in the previous podcast was that if Nebraska was going to win, it was going to be important to go up early. And that narrative immediately got tested because we had some nice big plays to start off our first drive of the ball when we got it. We marched all the way down to their goal line. It's like 3rd and 2. We get stuffed for nothing. And Scott Frost is faced with a decision of does he kick a field goal, get the 3, or go for it on 4th and 2 to try to score a point. And he decides to go for it and doesn't get it, which was a real big momentum blow, obviously. And in hindsight, knowing how close of a game it ended up being, we really would have liked to have those 3 points. But in the moment at the time, I didn't necessarily disagree with Scott there because I knew that this Michigan defense is really good. We may not get down here into the red zone very often. And so, if that gamble had paid off, it would have been a great, stab in the back of Michigan right there to start off the game with like a big 7-point lead rather than a 3-point lead. What was your thoughts on that decision?
Mine are the opposite. And I was in the game. I was right in that end zone watching it play out. And I said at the time, and I still believe, that it was the wrong decision. When you get down there and you get in that situation, you've got to take the points. And the problem is that if we had in the process of moving the ball had running success, I might have felt differently. But when it was obvious that early on in the game, we were not moving their defensive line. We were not getting anything. We were wasting downs, running it up the middle. And, Scott, I know in his press conference, even today, is making comments that, part of the success we had in the second half was because of our commitment to running inside in the first half. I don't buy that crap. Okay. Not the way that it played out. Bottom line is that we had no indications that we were going to be able to get a close, 4th and 2. We had just failed on a 3rd and 2. If you're not going to get more creative with your run choices, which he didn't, I thought his game plan was incredibly simplistic. I just felt like he had to get behind before he was willing to do anything. Way too many of his plays were stupid little zone read handoffs, most of them predetermined, running right up the middle. And we'd get 2 or 3 yards. We weren't moving the line of scrimmage at all.
Right.
If we had been in that first drive, then I would have felt better about going for it on a 4th and 2. But since we had not, and it was a chip shot field goal, and we were in the middle of the field, I would have trusted my very shaky kicking game to try to get 3 because the probabilities would still have been better. And it was too important for us to get some points for that drive. We could not come away empty. And going for it on 4th down gave you a far greater chance of coming away empty than what a field goal from that distance should have. Now I get it. He would argue, well, the thing that he knows that I don't know is what our field goal kicker was doing in practice this week. If our field goal kicker had been kicking like shit and couldn't even make extra points, okay, then maybe he was making the right choice.
Right.
But damn it, we should have a field goal kicker that's capable of kicking pretty much anything inside 35 yards. Should be a 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 type of kick for unless it's gotten blocked, or something like that, where there's a breakdown somewhere else. But the field goal kicker should be able to make about 8 out of 10.
Right. To Scott's credit, because I do recall that you're right on that 3rd and 2, like we went up the middle and got nothing. But earlier on that drive, as I recall, I believe Taylor had kind of tucked it and ran a nice run to the sideline, that had gotten us the first down in a situation where we needed it. On that 4th down play, we tried to go to the outside again, which I think was smarter than trying to go down the middle again.
Right.
But credit to their defensive players, they kind of read the movement and were right there to catch Adrian before he got anywhere. And clearly Michigan's got some good speed. So they were able to keep up with him.
Right. I know, but it just pissed me off. It was right in front of me too.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it should be noted you were at the game, got to experience it live again, although you're no longer in Husker Nation now.
I'm no longer there. No, that's right. We are now heading west towards our eventual warm weather destination here in the next 4 or 5 days. We're going to take a couple of days here in the beautiful state of Colorado and then head west from there.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I had some prearranged plans. I'd actually paid for tickets at the local theater here to go watch the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 fight. I've kind of got into boxing in the last couple years, and that was a big one. So I watched the first quarter from my couch, then listened to the radio for like the whole second quarter as we were, texting as a family as I went to the theater or whatever. And then from there, because there was undercard fights, before the big fight, I was kind of following along with the play-by-play on my phone, just refreshing ESPN. And I was, pumping my fist when I saw that like we started scoring back in the second half. In the first half, it was 13-0, by the end of the first half. So we, our defense did a solid job of slowing them down. But we really couldn't get anything going on offense after that first drive, which was part of what made it so frustrating that we had that nice success right away, but weren't able to get any points off of it. But clearly the team made some good adjustments at halftime, which is something that we've struggled with in the past, and came out with a different game plan in the second half, and were able to get some nice passes over them because they were doing a pretty good job of stuffing the run. Though I know, like you say, we started to kind of have more success with that as well in the second half. And we managed to eventually take the lead in the game.
Right. Well, we should have won the game. I mean, when you have the lead, with whatever it was, 10 minutes, 8 minutes left in the game in the fourth quarter, you should win the damn game, And again, well, we're getting ahead of ourselves with that because there's probably stuff we want to talk about before then. But our inability to close out a victory is so fundamental and so frustrating to me. And I think it's so basic, the things that should be being done versus the things that are being done, and the things that are being discussed, and the knowledge base that our team has are major issues of why we don't win games at the end.
Yeah. I will say, because we had 2 turnovers in the game, and they were both a little funny. In the first case, there was a ball that Martinez threw that was a little bit behind the receiver. It got tipped up into the air by the Michigan defender, and then
Mhm.
one of their guys dove down and caught it, making it.
Actually, he was on the ground. He was on the ground, and the ball kind of came towards him, and he was able to catch it. But
Yeah.
even that, he was rolling. In my opinion, in the video board that I was right next to, I had the massive, huge video board, clear as a bell. I believe that that ball touched the ground. He was bobbling it. It was sliding around in his hands. He never had control. And then the ball hit the ground. And then as it hit the ground, it allowed him to stabilize it and secure it. In my opinion, that guy did not have possession at the time that that ball hit the ground.
Okay.
And it
I
should not have been a fumble.
I I didn't pay close attention to the slow mo, so maybe you're right about that. I will say watching, because then I eventually watched the highlights of the game after my boxing match, which was amazing. I should say it was a great fight, but I watched the highlights afterwards, and it didn't seem out of the ordinary to me.
No,
In that
it,
he caught it.
you're right. It wasn't out of the ordinary. I don't view that as this horrific injustice or anything. But I'm just telling you that again, because we now have review and we did review
A
this
lot.
play, right? Then they should have gotten it right. And I believe there was video evidence that showed that he did not possess and have control of that ball when the ball hit the ground. Then, because the ground basically stopped the movement of the ball, it allowed him to finalize his control.
Right. And
So,
at that point in the game, it was 0-0, and that's what led
right,
Michigan to get
their first 3 point.
the first 3 points. Our defense held them to that point of the field, which was good.
Yep,
And then when Michigan later, they had their own interception in the second half, and that was a devastating blow to them because we had just scored. Then they threw an interception right to our guy, and we were able to get the ball with like less than 10 yards to go and scored
or
immediately.
again, right.
Right. So we were able to get 14 points real quick there. But then,
Yep,
of course, we had to one up them with the fumble that Martinez had when we had 3 minutes to go. We were down, or no, the game was tied rather. And so we had the chance
correct.
to go down, kick a field goal, and win. And on a 3rd and 1, he gets the first down and kind of keeps driving with his legs. And the play kind of seems like it's dead, it's over.
It was
And the ball pops out of his hand, and they pick it up and get the field goal to win the game right at the end.
correct. And what was disgusting was that there are countless examples throughout that game where Michigan's team had a player whose progress was stopped and the whistles blow immediately. But for Nebraska's players, they allowed him to be stood right up, even though he was not making progress. Okay. And did they blow the whistle? Nope, they didn't. Now, my criticism of Adrian about that exact situation is you're an idiot, Adrian, because you need to know your circumstance. Okay. It's not worth wasting the time during that sequence, right? Even if you gain an extra half yard, like you said, he had already gotten the first down. So, no reason to fight. Go down. It's done. Let's go. Let's get back up on the line of scrimmage and let's get another play going, right? We're up against the clock. That half a yard means nothing in the big scheme of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, he allowed them for the refs to make that call. He allowed those refs to say, "Oh, there's still activity going on there. I'm not blowing my whistle." So, as much as I want to completely blame the refs, I believe the refs on their own should have looked and said, "Progress is stopped." That game, that because it was over, okay, but they didn't because Adrian was still trying to move his feet. Now, why doesn't Adrian? How is it possible that Adrian doesn't know that? Why? How is it possible that our leader, our captain, our senior quarterback doesn't understand that basic concept of football? And the reason why it frustrates me is 2 plays before that, one of our wide receivers, Lure, one walk-on wide receiver that we have, who had caught a pass for like 7 yards or something like that, did the exact same thing. Instead of going down, he was trying to fight for extra yards, and he wasted another 3 or 4 seconds trying to do that. Didn't make any damn yardage and put himself in a situation where they could have stripped him. Okay. That means 2 plays out of 4 in the final drive, our players are trying effort for this extra half yard when it's irrelevant. Now, that's on Scott and his team, his staff, to talk to them before they went out in the final for the final drive to say, okay, guys, here's some quick reminders. Right? Remember, we're competing against the clock. We've got some great plays here. All right, we're going to get you guys in a position to move this ball down the field, and we're going to tie this ball game up. Okay, and but remember, points. I mean, excuse me, yards or a half a yard aren't as important as time, right? I mean, that's the kind of message, and they should already know that because they should have already covered that in spring practice. They should have covered that in fall camp. Those are the kinds of basic fundamentals of playing the game of football that everyone on our team should already know. And he wouldn't have had to use all the words I just did. He could simply say something much briefer that says, remember, guys, yards don't matter, time does. We'll get you the plays to get you the yards. Okay? That's all he would have had to say. And they all would have understood exactly what he meant because they've already coached on it. But you know what? I believe they've never coached that. I believe that if we had press people that had the cojones and weren't fearful that they would get their access to Scott or anybody else at the university, revoked or diminished, to say to Scott, it sure seems like our team didn't understand that time was way more valuable than a half a yard in that circumstance. Do you guys discuss that? Have your team players, do they all know that they should have gone down in that situation and that it was a mistake for that wide receiver and that a mistake for Adrian to fight for that extra yard in that circumstance? And if he says, no, we haven't talked about that, we just assume they know that. Or if he had said, yes, we do talk about it, well, why didn't they do that? Did you remind them? I mean, how is it possible that they weren't clued in on that?
Yeah, that definitely was frustrating. I personally have to assume that in that situation, Taylor wasn't 100% sure if he had gotten the first down. And, and if he hadn't gotten the first down, then driving for that extra half a yard to get the first down made sense. But that's my perception of it. And to me, it was one of those ones that was right on the edge of he was still churning his legs, but he wasn't making any progress. So frankly, that's an issue I have with not just this umpiring crew, but referees across the whole sport, is that I feel like there are a lot of situations where for the safety of the players, they should whistle it dead as soon as, that forward progress stops. In a lot of cases, they let the play kind of keep going for another couple seconds until they whistle it. And in my opinion, those are some of the situations where you can get some of those bad injuries, especially if a whole team is pushing back the quarterback, or it's one of those plays where the whole team comes to try to push the ball forward, and you've got 20 guys on both sides kind of fighting with each other and they all fall in a big pile. I think the refs should be whistling it dead sooner to try to avoid those sorts of situations in general.
Exactly. No, you're right. You're right. And that's the point. And yeah, I'm on one of the bulletin boards that I frequent, and they were calling for someone to ask the exact same question that I was basically just alluding to. You please ask Scott if he plans on making any adjustments in practice to prepare his team for clutch moments of games that we repeatedly fail in. And our situational awareness and our play calling when the game is on the line is just awful.
Yeah.
And that's really the reality. That's why Scott has lost about 7 or 8, of the 15 close games that we've had that have been one score or less. I would say at least half of them are on the fact that we did not have poise and did not understand the situational awareness that we needed to have so that we could do the right thing. And so our kids so frequently do exactly the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, yeah, and we've talked about that on past podcasts, so we won't spend too long on it now. But
I know.
it is true that we are a team that is talented, clearly, but we
Yep.
choke the situation gets tight. At the end of games, when you're in a position
Yep.
to win, we find a way to choke it.
Exactly.
And it's
And it's because you don't know the situation. You're not well coached enough that it's second natured for you to understand this is not the moment where I go and do that little extra push that ends up getting the 15-yard penalty. It's not the time when you put in effort to try to get that half a yard when that means that they're going to be able to stand you up until they can strip you of the football, like happened to Adrian this past weekend. I mean, and for a guy that's had all the snaps that he's had, played in all the big games that he's played in, how he doesn't know that at this point, and it's not second nature to him, is a crime and is a complete failure of the coaching staff and Adrian. Because at this point, maybe the coaching staff has talked to him about that a lot, and Adrian's the one that's just totally oblivious. I don't know.
right. And this was a game where, although Michigan did end up getting 460 total yards of offense on our defense, they came up with a lot of stops in critical situations. In particular, there was the time where Michigan scored a touchdown, on like 3rd and 1 or whatever it was, and then everyone was proceeding like it was a touchdown, and Scott was yelling at the refs to review it, and I believe he challenged it. They reviewed the call, and it turned out that they did not actually get that touchdown, and so basically it ended up being a situation where we stopped them and forced them to kick a field goal instead of a touchdown there, which was a critical moment. And I know between all those defensive stops and the crowd noise, which was having a serious effect on Michigan with all the false starts they were having, Frank, unfortunately, was another one of those situations where I feel like our defense played pretty well, and the offense just couldn't quite, they got close, but they just couldn't quite close the deal.
Yeah, well, that is unacceptable. We're close, but we can't close the deal, or we just didn't quite close the deal. Is and again, I think some of the answers, even from Martinez about the fumble, for example, and saying, "Well, I don't know what more I could have done." I think there's a lot he could have done. First, being secure the football and just drop to the ground, save the seconds, and get back to the huddle. Let's go. Even if it's 4th and 1 and we have to go for it, I'd rather have that than a fumble and our opportunity is gone.
Well, of course, we would rather have it be 4th and 1 than the fumble. But if it was a situation where, if on that 3rd and 1 play, it looked like he had the chance to put in a second effort and get it, and he didn't because he was conservative and dropped down with the ball, and then we don't get on that 4th and 1, then you'd be yelling at him, well, why the hell didn't he put in that extra effort to get that 3rd and 1,
Well, yeah, but that's the difference between is one guy trying to tackle me and a little bit of effort and I can fling forward, or are there 4 guys, which in this case there were a bunch of Michigan defenders. I mean, he wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
They were pushing him backwards. But back to the thing with Scott Frost, and specifically that sequence of events where he literally had to almost get a personal foul from on the sidelines just to get the referee's attention was disgusting, because the refs were purposely ignoring Scott, and only after they finally conceded because he went crazy did they review it, and they weren't even looking at the right thing. They weren't looking at the fact that the quarterback stumbled and his knee was down before he even handed the ball off. Okay, so
Right.
the play was dead 3 yards back. Okay, and Scott had to do everything short of throwing rocks at the umpire to get him to acknowledge that. And yet, literally within a couple minutes of that same play, there was a circumstance that Harbaugh was objecting to, and he got 3 minutes of the white hats and 2 of his other referees' attention, and they sat there during a commercial break and gave him this long, eloquent period of time where they got to tell jokes to each other. God knows what they got to do, but they had 3 minutes together. Okay, did he then run over and share with Scott Frost whatever that dialogue was about so that they were on the same page? Nope, he didn't give Scott time of day. The whole game was like that. It was ridiculous the way that the referee crew was showing favoritism constantly to Jim Harbaugh and literally purposely looking the other way because so that they didn't have to look Scott Frost in the eye. They were doing everything they could to ignore Scott.
Yeah.
So that's another one of the Rick crew that drives me crazy.
Well, the refereeing in this game was just bad in general because, like you say, there was a lot of going up to the booth for video review on both sides, both for Michigan and for Nebraska, stuff that they missed on the field. And probably what set that all off was the very bizarre defensive clap penalty that we received, which I have never seen called in a game at any point in time.
Well, you may recall that Michigan State did that to us for an entire football game a few years ago. I believe it was I'm talking going back to maybe Taylor Martinez's last year, or maybe it was Armstrong. But bottom line is that they did it the entire game, caused all kinds of disruptions of Nebraska's offensive system, and our coaches were begging for them to address it, and they never did. Okay, and now here you go. Fast forward a few years later, and they call it on us right away, and it wasn't even that obvious. It wasn't like we were doing it that often, if we were doing it at all. It was not something that was, a conscious thing like it was with the Michigan State game. Okay, and again, that's just another example of the Big Ten seemingly always conveniently making decisions that lead to us getting penalties when other teams don't. There was also a second situation where there was a blatant late hit, a circumstance where our player was tackled, the play was clearly over, and a defensive lineman from Michigan came in and blasted one of our offensive linemen significantly late in the play. No flag. So it wasn't just what they called was wrong, it was the stuff they missed as well. The amount of holding that was going on. I mean, it was just crazy. And I'm just tired of these referees who are supposed to be some of the best because they've risen through the ranks to the level of a premier Power 5 conference, and they suck. So
yeah,
something needs to be done about that.
Well, I think we talked about the refs a bit in the previous game against Michigan State, where those refs were also going to the booth a lot to review stuff in a way that kind of slowed down the game, but they were reaching the right calls, and they were also kind of letting the boys play a bit more, versus this crew, which, in theory seemed to be more ticky-tack, right, with like that defensive clapping call that they called on us right away. Or like the one that really bothered me was there was a huge pass interference call on us where their quarterback just threw a ball completely out of bounds because he was getting pressured, and so it was an uncatchable ball, and they still called pass interference on our guy, which led to them getting a score because of those 15 yards.
That was right down in front of us. Horrible call. I mean, if we didn't even have a defender over there, I don't think that their receiver would have been in a position to catch that football. I mean, it was totally absurd.
Yeah.
And the fact that they didn't review that, there was no effort to rectify that very bad call. It's just too consistently against Nebraska and in favor of whoever we're playing, that I'm convinced that there is not so much a thing to hurt Nebraska, but that the quality of refereeing is very poor, and they favor teams. Their preparation as they prepare for a game, they look at what the tendencies of the teams are, and once you gain a reputation for being a highly penalized team, it's like you can't get away from it. Okay, right. Even if you get better. And the other team, if they're a low penalized team, they can get away with stuff because, well, they're a low penalized team. And so they come in with these preconceived notions and they just keep fitting the narrative. And it's crazy.
Right.
So
Well,
I'm sick of it.
last thing we'll say about officiating is just something we've mentioned on past podcasts, which is uh, for me, it's the inconsistency, the fact that, like, we've worked with multiple Big Ten crews, obviously, in our games this year. And then, there have been some questionable calls for sure in our past games, but there was nothing as blatant as this before now, right? So something about this particular crew, was off, and I don't know
Right.
what that was, but, they should be making more of an effort to unify what pass interference is, and holding and all that sort of stuff, what the standards are for the league at the very least. Ideally it should be consistent across the whole nation, but I'll settle right now just for it to be consistent within the conference, but it's not even that.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Exactly. And it just, my observation of watching a lot of Big Ten football games, not just Nebraska games, is that there are favorites among the crews. There are teams that tend to have more favorable circumstances happen for them, where calls that clearly get missed, and then other calls that are ticky tack that get applied to other teams, and it's kind of crap.
yeah.
And I
Although,
want to see that consistency as well.
one interesting note, though, when you actually look at the stats, both teams had 6 penalties. Ours were for 47 yards. Theirs were for 55. So
Right.
just looking at that, they were actually more penalized than us.
Right. But it's the timing of when our,
Right.
I mean, that pass interference call was massively huge, massively huge. The no call of a personal foul penalty, that because that was on the Michigan side of the field at the time, and had we gotten that 15-yarder, which we should have gotten, we would have gotten an automatic first down, and it probably would have pushed the ball into a 1st and 10 from like the 35 or the 30-yard line. I mean, we would have been right down close, because at the time we were already over midfield. So not getting that call was huge in terms of the momentum and the movement of that particular offensive series for us. So, but again, um, I'm gonna chill my wheels here a little bit and accept that at the end of the day, this is Scott Frost's loss again, and to some extent, Adrian. I'm going to put Adrian in the almost semi-coach category because of the amount of snaps and games that he's played. He should have known better. He should have known to get down, and that a fumble at that moment in time was the absolute only thing he could not do. Okay,
Yep.
and so he had to do anything short of chewing a guy's arm off to make sure that didn't happen. Okay, so he just can't do that.
Right.
Just can't do it.
Um,
And yet he finds a way to do it.
Right. Even though, in general, he played well this game. I
Yeah.
remember watching the highlights. There was one pass in particular where he stayed in the pocket and he took a shot from a Michigan guy, but he threw a nice pass right down to the sideline, right in stride with our receiver. It was a beautiful, beautiful pass.
Yes.
I was like, all right,
Yes.
that's the stuff you like to see.
Yes. Well, and all year, Adrian, this has been his best year. He has played really well, but he's also found a way with his brain farts to lose us 2 football games.
Right.
So
Now, transitioning away from this game and looking ahead to the rest of the season, because as we said in the last podcast, this was an important one for us to win if we really wanted to achieve that goal of winning 6 games, and we couldn't quite do it. So now we're 3-4. However, I think between this and the Michigan State game, where we were clearly playing well, in competition with these teams that are considered to be better than us, and just falling short right at the end, it shows that, like, Scott is making strides, and his recruits are, like, showing up with the talent that they do have. So I think my personal opinion, and you can disagree here, my personal opinion is if he wins against Minnesota and Purdue, the 2 teams that we definitely should beat coming up, in what remains of our schedule. And so then we're a 5-win team for 5-7 by the end of the year. I think if he does that, he's done enough to save his job this year, and he'll definitely be our coach next year.
Well, I agree with you that, and I already have gone on record from the beginning of the season saying I don't believe he's going to lose his job this year, and I even feel more strongly about that now because I think that our new athletic director has also looked at the team and said they're playing hard, they're playing much more disciplined football now than they were early in the season. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can point to and say the trajectory is really good, and our Trev Albers, our athletic director, has said it's not measured necessarily in wins and losses. He's looking at all the intangible stuff, and he's seeing a lot of positives, but he's also seeing a special teams area that's still a crapshoot. He's also seeing the fact that we're not showing composure and poise at the end of games, and we're making bad, uninformed decisions that look like you're not a well-coached football team. Those are some concerns for him, but he's going to look at that and say those are correctable. So let's go back to what you just said. If we can beat Minnesota and Purdue in their next two ball games, then we're 5-4 going to Ohio State. Then we get done with Ohio State. We're 5-5. Now it's a 2-game season. We play Wisconsin and Iowa,
Yeah.
and we got to win one of those two games.
Right.
We just have to find a way to get a W off of one of those two teams, and then we get our 6 wins.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I know on a previous podcast I had kind of said, "Oh, I bet you we could beat Iowa," but after their performance against Penn State, particularly their defense, and it's an away game, I believe. We're playing them at home, and that stadium was rocking in that Penn State game. So I'm feeling less confident about that. So Wisconsin's the one maybe that I'm hoping that we can find a way to get, but for right now, we got to keep our eyes focused on what's coming up next, which is Minnesota. One thing that I think's a little that hasn't been talked about much about our team, but I think is significant, is that this is going to be our 8th game in a row because we played on week 0 of college football and we've had no byes up till now. Now we do have 2 byes coming up right after this Minnesota game and before our game against Wisconsin, I believe. So we're going to kind of get our break here coming up, but our boys have been playing a lot of physical football, so they got to be, that kind of wear and tear has been building up on our guys. Meanwhile, Minnesota is actually coming off of a bye week, so they had a whole extra week to prepare to play us.
Right. That does really suck because that concerns me a great deal. Mm-hmm. And that's why you can't really look at, because you know what they're going to know? What have I said about preparing for Scott Frost? Because he does such a poor job of preparing his team for things that weren't already on film. So now you throw new stuff at him. You throw new formations. You throw new motions. You throw new special teams formations, special teams. What do I want to say? You have a fake punt, fake field goal, onside kick ready for this Nebraska game, because if Nebraska's team hasn't seen it, it's not likely they're ready for it. Okay, because we do such a shitty job on special teams preparation. So if I'm Minnesota, then that's the way to go.
Yeah, and there are some significant injuries on both sides, both teams going into this game. On our side, Teddy Prochazka, who's our freshman who came in the previous game against Northwestern to kind of change up our offensive line. Has done great in that role. Had a knee injury in the game, and turns out he's getting surgery on that knee. Is going to be out for the whole season. So that's a big loss for our reorganized offensive line. On the other hand, 2 of Minnesota's best running backs are injured and will not be playing in this game. So they are lacking some of those weapons on their side of the ball.
Right. But the thing is that you'll recall last year, Minnesota used woe is us, we've got a bunch of injuries, then come to find out, or a bunch of guys that were out because of COVID, and it sounded like they were going to be really depleted, and then it turned out not to be the case. Okay, so I don't believe a damn thing that comes out of Minnesota and that lion PJ Fleck. So you can pretty much count on the fact that they're going to have plenty of running backs, and they're going to do just fine. Okay.
Okay.
And they're going to have an offensive line that's had 2 weeks to prepare.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Minnesota's schedule was interesting. I was looking at it earlier because the two things that kind of stood out to me was they killed Colorado earlier in the year, like 34-0. But then they lost to or I think it was Bowling Green.
Yes, it
Yes.
was.
So they've lost a loss to Bowling Green, a loss to Ohio State, but they beat that Colorado team. They beat Purdue. So they're kind of a middling team in the Big Ten right now. It would appear, which isn't that far off from what we are right now.
Right.
So a game that we should win. I certainly believe that. But we are playing them at Minnesota after this kind of stretch of home games we've had. So that'll be a extra challenge for us. And Minnesota, kind of like Northwestern, is one of those teams where they always seem to come prepared and are a type of team that doesn't make many mistakes.
Exactly. And the fact that they've had 2 weeks to prepare for us, they're going to, I'm telling you, they're going to come out and look like a different team. They're going to have enough changes. They're going to have inserted maybe some new players into the lineup and stuff they'll shuffle some things around if they feel they need to, but they're going to throw a lot of new stuff at, like you said, a fatigued, physically drained Nebraska team who's now, you know, uh, had to deal with two devastatingly painful losses in the last 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they all know, all the Nebraska players know, we quote, quote, should be better. Our record should be better, but it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Although,
So,
but you'll recall that I said after that Michigan State game that I was worried that that was a loss that could kind of derail a season, right? Because it was we had that game in the bag so much, and then we messed it up. But Scott, to his credit, was able to use that kind of game as a rallying cry, proving to the players that no, see, you guys do have the talent. We can do this, and we came out and played our best game of the season against Northwestern. Now, this Michigan game was also a frustrating loss, but my impression now is that I think Scott has the team enough together on his game plan, and knowing that they are playing good football, that we won't have a sudden mental drop off in this Minnesota game. Physically, that could be a different question, but I think mentally we'll keep this kind of level we've had. Let's just hope that we're able to get enough of a lead in by the third quarter that we can't possibly screw it up by the fourth.
well, that's the only way we win it. Yeah, we have to have a blowout like we did against
Northwestern.
Northwestern. Yeah. Now, yeah. So the reality is Minnesota's only losses are an extremely close loss to Ohio State, 45-31. I mean that's only 14 points. I mean, and if I remember correctly, at halftime, they were still within striking distance of Ohio State, and then the Bowling Green game that you mentioned a little bit ago, and that was a 14-10 loss. But they crushed Colorado. They barely beat Miami of Ohio, and they beat Purdue by 7 points.
Yeah. It should be worth noting. My impression of Ohio State is that they, were kind of a team that's taken some time to kind of get it together. It seems like they do kind of have it together now, but earlier in the season they didn't, because obviously they had the big upset loss to Oregon, who has now also been
Right.
upset. So I think there's something to that, kind of similar to how we played really close with Oklahoma. And we'll talk about it here in a bit, but Oklahoma with their new quarterback, I think, has figured something out that they didn't earlier in the season. Talking about this Minnesota game, though, and our score predictions, I'm going to go ahead and predict that we win. I'm going to stay positive here because this is a very important game for us coming off of that Michigan loss. So I'm going to predict that we win. Let's say it's 35 Nebraska to 17 Minnesota.
Okay. I'm also going to say it because if we don't win this one, I'm going to be completely crushed, and our season is all but over in my mind. And I don't know how these young kids are going to be able to handle it any better. So I'm really hopeful that now you want to talk about a team coming unraveled and Scott being in jeopardy of losing his job, lose this game and see what happens. So this is an absolute, positively, no question about it, must win game for Nebraska. And I hope that he can convey that to his team and his team understands that. And then they go out and play with the hair on fire intensity that they're going to need because trust me, the crowd is not going to be loving them. That crowd is going to be crazy. And I guarantee PJ Fleck, since he's had 2 weeks to prepare, has been working the media and everyone to get everybody in a frenzy there. And since they didn't have a game last week, there's going to be a purple out, whatever they call it up there, a stripe game. That it's going to be crazy, crazy game for them, and we're going to have to beat Minnesota at its best. Okay, but I think we're up to the task also. So I'm going to say 35-28.
Okay, a bit closer than me, but gonna be a W, according to us. Now switching to the national side of things, there were actually a lot of great games in Week 6, high scoring affairs. Some even might go down as classics in years to come. One of the big standout ones is Oklahoma versus Texas, the Red River Shootout, a classic. And I believe you said on the previous podcast that that's a classic rivalry game that not always, but often seems to give unpredictable outcomes. And that definitely was the case this time because Texas scored super quickly. I believe they got a blocked punt. They scored, then they got a blocked punt on Oklahoma. So they went up 14-0 like in the first 2 minutes of the game. And it was actually 28-7 by halftime.
Right.
And Oklahoma's starting quarterback was really struggling, throwing some interceptions and things like that. So they actually swapped him out for their young guy, Williams, who is a kind of a Heisman hopeful in a lot of people's eyes. And he kind of showed his stuff in this game. And once he came in, their offense got going a lot better. And Texas had their own costly turnovers that led to easy points for Oklahoma. So it ended up being a tie ball game. And then Oklahoma ended up getting the ball with a few seconds. I don't know how much time it was. It was like a minute or less to go. And they managed to score, get a big play to score. And so they ended up winning 55-48 in a crazy game.
Well, it really was. That was a crazy game. And it was just nuts the way, neither defense could stop the other team. And like every play, I don't know what the average yards gained per play was, but I would guess that after about the first quarter, it was pushing 8 yards for each team. So they just were chunking it down the field.
Yeah. Well, and I forget his name, but there was a player on Texas's side of the field, a wide receiver who had a breakout game because it felt like he was getting the ball for a touchdown every play. And I guess he hadn't played that much because they were saying, oh, this is his breakout game. This is his, Hollywood moment, because he played amazing.
Right. Well, and it might very well be, but they've got other issues, but yeah.
Yeah. So Texas got some talent. And like I said earlier, I think with this quarterback change, as well as it kind of impressed me seeing, some of these Oklahoma guys, just running away with the ball, their wide receivers and their running backs, getting some great plays, and knowing that our defense, contained them pretty well in our game against them kind of made me feel better about that side of the ball for us. Because we certainly did better than Texas's defense ended up doing. And then in the SEC, there was Arkansas versus Ole Miss, which ended up being a 51-52 victory for Ole Miss. Another crazy back and forth where Arkansas also was down, got the ball with just a couple seconds to go, less than a minute, and managed to score on literally the last play of the game. I'm pretty sure they scored. And then their head coach decided to go for 2, and they didn't get it. So they lost by 1 point in the end, but I guess they didn't want to they didn't feel confident going to overtime. So he bet it all on that 2-point conversion, kind of like Tom Osborne did way back in the day. So yeah, that Arkansas team, they're fun to watch for sure this year. And Ole Miss was coming off of a loss to Alabama. Uh,
Alabama, right?
so I'm sure, yeah, they were happy to get that. I think it was at Ole Miss as well. So yeah, they're
It
probably
was it was at Ole Miss, and I had some friends there, and it was crazy. We were texting back and forth. They were in the stadium, and it was one of those things where it was like, what's going to happen next? And then they were like, all right, we're going to win this one. Oh no, we're not. Oh yes, we are. I mean, it was just what a roller coaster, right?
yeah.
But it's damn. I mean, again, where's the defense? Well, how are these scores getting so crazy?
Yeah. Well, yeah. With Oklahoma and Texas, I understand that because the Big 12 is kind of known for being all offense, no defense. But the SEC doesn't quite have that reputation, so it was a little strange to see that. But the craziest upset of this week has to go to Texas A&M, who was playing against Alabama. I don't think A&M was even ranked in the top 25, and they managed to win 41-38 at home, upsetting the number one team in the nation. And I feel sorry. I believe Alabama's playing Mississippi State this week, and I kind of feel sorry for them because that Saban is going to get his guys riled up and yelled at, and they're going to come out swinging against Mississippi State this week.
Exactly. And now with this new setup that we have of college football playoff, Alabama's still going to be in that Final Four, and because they had that loss, and because they're going to be able to point to that experience, this team probably doesn't lose again, right? That's exactly what Saban needed to win another championship. If that hadn't happened, there might have been a chance that someone might have nipped him late, like he might have lost in a conference championship game to Georgia or something. But I think because of this loss, no one's beaten them now.
Well, we'll see because Georgia does look awfully good this year.
They do.
And if Georgia did find a way to beat Alabama in that conference championship game, then Alabama with 2 losses, and there's no way they get in there unless something really crazy happens.
True. But I'm here to tell you, I just think you're going to see Alabama's team take it up a whole notch now.
Yeah. And this was significant in that Nick Saban had this insane record against all of his former assistant coaches that they had never been able to beat him in a game. That finally got broken here. So that streak has come to an end. So congratulations to Jimbo Fisher and everybody over there at Texas A&M. I'm sure they were partying that night pretty nicely.
Yes, absolutely.
And then in the Big Ten, there was Iowa versus Penn State, number 3 and number 4, according to the AP rankings. And we actually predicted that game, both of us giving the edge to Penn State. I said 35-24. You said 28-17. But the final score ended up being 23-20. Iowa beating Penn State with a very impressive performance by Iowa's defense. Not quite as much by their offense, but Penn State, I believe they had 4 turnovers over the course of the game. So it was one of those where, frankly, they should have won if they weren't self-destructing so bad.
And that's what Iowa makes you do because they're so disciplined defensively, and they run a tremendous zone defense in the back end of their defense that allows their defensive backs to be hawks that just pick off passes and read quarterbacks, and they're going to get 2 or 3 a game. And when they do that, good things happen for the team. And so if you're going to beat Iowa, then you need to be able to run the football. And Penn State couldn't do that consistently enough, which we knew that about the Penn State games going all the way back to the first week of the season where they struggled against Wisconsin. They ended up beating Wisconsin, but it was a nail biter, and they won because of their passing game. They couldn't run worth a damn against Wisconsin, and so to beat Iowa, you're going to have a team that can really control the clock and just pound the rock.
Yep.
And so that's the key with the Iowa team.
It's a weird situation because Alabama lost and Iowa won and Penn State lost. Iowa is now the number 2 team in the nation according to the polls,
I
and
know.
frankly, they have a their crossover teams that they have to play from the other side of the division. Penn State was their toughest test because I'm just
Right.
looking at it right now. They've got Purdue, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Minnesota, Illinois, and us. So if they keep playing at the level they've been playing, Wisconsin's will be the biggest test, but they could very well beat all those teams and be undefeated going into that Big Ten championship game.
Right. And most likely be number one or darn close to it, the number 2 spot. I mean, they're not dropping from there if they don't lose, in all likelihood. So, yeah, they're going to be right up there. And so at this point, that's where I'm hoping if we can take care of business this weekend and start building some momentum towards basically a situation where we've either just just won our 6th game and have the momentum of winning 3 of our last 4, um, and then go into that Iowa game with that, or if it's one of those deals where we're 5 wins and we're scratching to get that 6th win and bowl eligibility against the number 2 team in the country at our home, because that's in Lincoln this year.
Oh,
That
that's
Iowa
right.
game. Yep, we play Wisconsin at Wisconsin.
You're right. Yeah, which is why, and like I mentioned, those bye weeks we have coming up because we have a bye week between Minnesota, Purdue, and then a bye week before that Wisconsin game. So that's why I'm thinking if we beat Minnesota, we beat Purdue, we have a bye week before we play Wisconsin. Then I think that Wisconsin games becomes really critical because I think that's our best chance to get to 6 wins is to beat them and then play Iowa at home. And I mean, if we could manage that, at that point, Nebraska fans would already be, pretty satisfied with the record. Obviously, we'd be frustrated by the season overall with all the close losses and everything. But the energy in Memorial Stadium would be really rocking, especially if Iowa was the number 2 team in the nation still, and we had the chance to make a big time upset.
Absolutely. Which that is the one thing, and I know I've been very negative on this podcast because the more I reflect on the game and just the irritants of the referee screw ups, of Scott's decisions, of some just really fundamental things that we could have done so easily correctly, and then we would have won the football game. But the environment that we got to experience, your mother and I, and my sister, and my nephew Trevor, your cousin, got to go with us, and I mean it was a crazy environment. It was so cool.
Yeah, I could tell even from the TV that place was rocking. Like I said, with all those false starts we got in Michigan, and I know the stadium did kind of quiet down in that first half because we weren't getting anything going. But then the second half, obviously, kind of turned that around for us. So hopefully, we can get these wins strung together and get that kind of environment again for that Iowa game. Looking ahead to next week, there aren't as many high profile games on the national side of things. There's Oklahoma State, Texas, Florida versus LSU, and number 1 Georgia playing against number 11 Kentucky. I should actually look up who's at home in that game because that's probably going to be very important. But I know that Kentucky won. They're still undefeated right now, I believe, which is why they're ranked 11th. Now,
Right.
it may be a situation like Arkansas where because Arkansas also played Georgia and kind of had the reality of the talent difference kind of crash down on them. So I'm wondering if it might be a similar situation with Kentucky.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at Kentucky's the data behind their record, I mean, they have won an awful lot of close games. They have had a fairly easy draw. The toughest draw they've had so far was the Florida team. And because recall that Florida almost beat Alabama, right? Florida
Mm-hmm.
really hung in there with Alabama. Um, and, and I mean, they just have barely beaten a lot of folks. They barely beat South Carolina. They barely beat, etc. So I have a feeling that this will be another wake up call within the SEC where Georgia's going to impose their will a little bit. But I will also admit that Georgia has historically been a team that has always found one game to lay an egg.
Mm-hmm.
And so this might be their week, right? To be surprised, but I don't think it is. I think Georgia wins and probably comfortably.
Yeah. I agree with your assessment there, because that has also been my impression of Georgia, is that they find a way to lose one unexpected game. And now the pressure's especially on them now that Alabama's tripped. Now they're the number one team, so that kind of mantle is on them. However, I did just check, and it is at Georgia. If it was at Kentucky, I might have given them a chance at that kind of upset win. But if it's at Georgia, I think we're going to go ahead and predict that game. And I've got to go ahead and say that Georgia's going to win, and I think they'll win big. So I'll say that Georgia ends up winning 38-7 over Kentucky.
Wow, 38-7. I think Kentucky will score more than that. So I'm going to say, but I don't know much about Kentucky's defense. So I'm going to go 42 points for Georgia and 17 points 21. Let's do 21. 21 points for Kentucky.
All right. Yep, we'll get to see our former player Wan'Dale Robinson in that game. Hopefully he gets some good runs against Georgia.
He's been doing very well so far. So
yeah,
which regretfully supports his decision as opposed to it not being that way. And frankly, he's one of the few players that's transferred from Nebraska and then moved on to another college and performed well.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the guys that we've had that have bailed and transferred out haven't really done so hot.
Yeah. What's the name of our backup quarterback from last year? I remember I was seeing him in a game.
McCaffrey.
Yeah. Well, no, not McCaffrey, the other guy.
Oh, Vedral.
Yes.
Yeah. He for Rutgers. He's the starter at Rutgers.
Yes.
Yep. And he's doing okay. Yeah, and he's splitting time too. I mean, there's another quarterback that also plays for them as well. So he's kind of I won't say part-time starter, but he's had the starting job, and then I think he got injured or something, but he hasn't played every game.
Gotcha.
But yeah, he's doing okay.
Yep, he's doing all right. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it for this podcast. We'll be watching this Minnesota game this weekend and hoping that our Huskers are able to put on a performance like Northwestern, get a nice statement victory out there, and give us some momentum going into that bye week for the last section of our season that will be so very important. So if if you all out there enjoyed listening to us, you can find us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please leave us a rating or review. We love hearing from the fans. You can also reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com if you want to leave a comment. We'll read out what you send us on the air. We always love hearing from the fans. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.